I was afraid of like too much expectation for intimacy. I really enjoyed being with the person, but then I really needed that separation to then want to come back and recommence connection and intimacy and physical touch and stuff like that.
So much of like secure relating is about being able to like attune to each other, talk openly about your needs, see where each other are at, and have those conversations to make those healthy compromises in the middle. And that's where you see a lot of that momentum.
Her name is Thais Gibson.
Thais Gibson.
Thais Gibson.
Thais Gibson.
Thais Gibson.
Thais Gibson.
I hope I pronounce her name properly. Thais Gibson.
I am so excited for you to be here with me today. Thank you for joining us. Hello and welcome to another episode of our podcast. Today, Mike and I are going to take a deep dive into a few key topics. We are going to start by talking a little bit about the importance of understanding why dismissive avoidant attachment styles struggle to plan for the future and may avoid future planning or avoid really making commitments ahead of time. We'll talk about those key underlying reasons as to why, but most importantly, what you can do if you're on the receiving end of this. Then we're going to move into talking a little bit about the importance of co-regulation for both fearful avoidant attachment styles and dismissive avoidance and what that means. And I'll give you a hint. It is the secret to actually being comfortable doing things like living together or spending more time with somebody. In particular, if you have an avoidant side to your attachment style. So of course, it's a fearful avoidant or dismissive avoidant. And we'll talk a lot about how this affects anxious attachment styles when they're in relationships with individuals who struggle with this. We'll also talk a little bit about compromises. And if you didn't already know, a big part of how we discuss this podcast is from the angle of me originally being a fearful avoidant attachment style and then doing the work to become secure, and Mike originally being a dismissive avoidant attachment style and doing the work to become secure. So you can hear our perspectives at a deeper level on what it's sort of like to be on either side of the continuum. And we'll also talk a lot about how this can affect anxious attachment styles and why it's meaningful for them to understand some of these deeper insights so they can actually take themselves into consideration when making decisions about what to do next at critical times in their relationships. And then Mike and I, in the second half of this episode, talk a little bit more about the common reasons a dismissive avoidant or fearful avoidant will do the healing work, along with the anxious attachment style, common reasons they'll do the healing work, and why it is absolutely a necessity in order to build secure relationships in your future. And we'll also share a little bit from our personal experiences here. If you are enjoying this episode, please subscribe. And if you're listening on YouTube, you can check us out on any of your favorite podcast hosting platforms. We are on there as well. And so you can listen to us on the way to work or things like that. And if you are on the podcast and you want to see the full video version, you can check us out on YouTube at Personal Development School Thais Gibson. I really hope you enjoy this episode. I'm really excited to hear your thoughts and shares and even future follow-up questions from some of the topics we discussed today. And I'm so excited you stopped by.
Okay, so now we're going to switch gears, and I wanted to talk about a question that was brought up, and I thought it was really interesting, and I think we'll get some good info out of this from both of us. Why do DAs not tend to plan for the future? So why do DAs not overly want to be like, hey, we need to be this, the relationship needs to be here at this point? Like, why do DAs kind of avoid that completely? And on the flip side, why do FAs need that planning, need to know sort of there's growth in the relationship, need to know sort of what's happening in the future of the relationship? So we'll dive right in. We can start with the DA point of view or the FA point of view. What do you like?
Yeah,
DAs?
I'll start with the FA and then you start with the DA. So
Okay.
for the fearful avoidant, a lot of times it is really true that they kind of like to have a plan. And so much of that is there's a couple of things. Fearful avoidants, they're really comfortable, ironically enough, outside of their comfort zone. So I think when we think of fearful avoidants, we think of like chaos, and they're used to kind of going from chaotic experience to chaotic experience. But the things that matter to them, usually having a bit of a game plan around that, even if it's something like going on a date with somebody they're interested in, or knowing what social plans they have on the weekend, or having a work plan, like depending on the things that are really high in their needs. A lot of times fearful avoidants will really strive for more certainty than they actually realize. So there's this kind of very typical of the fearful avoidant, this kind of like double-edged sword, or these kind of two extremes. One extreme is like total go with the flow, especially if a fearful avoidant is like a little bit in a state of CPTSD. where whenever we talk about this, like when you think of somebody who's really dysregulated quite chronically from past trauma, they make a lot of decisions from their 4F responses. So like their fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. And when you look at the actual implications of that, it's really interesting because, if you're in sympathetic nervous system mode, and let's say you have an over-exaggerated fight response, like somebody bothers you and you over-defend yourself. Well, now all of a sudden that wreaks havoc on your life. That causes, downsides. If you have too strong of a flight response, you may like leave jobs or leave friendships like really out of the blue because you're like, I need to get as far away from them as possible from this thing that's hurting me. If you have a freeze response, you may avoid things. Like not look at your bills in the drawer for a really long time, those kinds of avoidant situations where your mind's racing, but your body's kind of in this freeze mode. And lastly, your fawn response is often this like people pleasing mode. So on one hand, and when you people please, a lot of times you're not being your authentic self. So then like that will bite you later. So on one hand, there is this like chaos where fearful avoidants are not really planning when they're coming from that space. But the place that you will see that them break from that is the things they really care about. And a lot of times, if you're used to being in chaos, trying to have a plan, maybe the only place that you feel like you actually have this sense of control to actually have some degree of certainty. So knowing like what's going to happen or how things can pan out can give this individual a sense of control in a way. And, there's a whole bunch that really goes into this. Like you'll often see fearful avoidant attachment styles trying to drive results along in their lives to get to an outcome. Sometimes it's the way the fearful avoidant actually sabotages, is that they're trying to just get an answer to get certainty so quickly that they may do things that they know are not going to bode well for the person they're in a relationship with. And they'd rather just have the answer than leave things waiting and running. And so a lot of times I would see things for a fearful avoidant, for example, like they know that somebody's like not quite on the same page or moving as quickly as they would like to in a relationship dynamic. But what they do is instead of actually like having the patience to have a conversation in person or things like that, they'll send a text message that says like, are we doing this or not? Or, these kinds of dynamics that are like, they're just trying to get to an answer. And anybody who sees themselves like pushing that along in a relationship, anybody who sees themselves needing that in various ways, a lot of times it's if you're coming from an internal sense of uncertainty and unsafety, sometimes trying to control the outside environment or world, or trying to have a sense of like certainty around an answer to everything gives you that sense of control and safety that you may not otherwise have, especially if you're constantly moving from a really dysregulated nervous system. So I guess to sort of summarize, a lot of times there can be this chaos, but there's a lot of planning around things that FAs truly care about. But sometimes that planning can be so intense or controlled or pushed along so fast that it actually can create these kind of sabotaging patterns long term where you're just so desperate to get an answer to something that you're not actually like allowing for a pace that's necessary for the other person to move at or for the other person to feel like included in those kinds of answers or conversations in a relationship.
Sure. One thing I heard you say, I guess, is like predictability. Like they just really want to know what's coming down the pipeline so they're not going to get hurt, betrayed, and have their trust completely shattered. So the more you sort of ask, hey, what's going on here? What's happening? Like I really want this certainty so I can kind of relax a little bit, right?
Yeah. And so much of like, I think we talked about this recently, but if you look at anxious attachment styles, their main attachment strategy is proximity, like to get closer to somebody. Dismissive avoidants are like to maintain their independence and their space and to not get like trapped in the wrong situation. Fearful avoidance, theirs is hypervigilance and to always read between the lines, to always be like 3 steps ahead on things, to guess what's going to happen next. And it can be such a deeply ingrained survival strategy that it actually becomes a part of like how you make decisions and operate. And I find that fearful avoidants have an especially difficult time dealing with when they can't read between the lines, when there's a lack of like literal communication or clear path forward or clear understanding of what's going on in front of them. Not only will they like often go to like extreme lengths to try to get a plan, but also they will often sabotage a relationship dynamic accidentally because they're pushing for that understanding so much, so fast, so soon that it can actually fire in a lot of ways.
When they can't read between the lines, is that when sort of like the overthinking goes on overdrive where they're like, can't focus on much else? They're like, I need to figure this out. Like, I don't feel safe.
100%. And I've seen situations over the years where like fearful avoidance, maybe they're dating somebody for like a few weeks, but they're getting mixed signals. And, there's an argument to be made for like, maybe it was a good thing that you sabotaged it. But I've seen like tons and tons of situations where somebody will, rather than like trying to move the relationship along and give like space for both people to kind of find their footing in it, like really abruptly have a conversation, call somebody out of the blue and be like, hey, it's 6 weeks, like what's going on here? I need to know immediately. And it can cause somebody to feel like it's an ultimatum or put on the spot really early on.
Mm,
And it's because like if there's confusion or there's read between the lines and you can't read between the lines,
yeah.
it feels like the main defense that like a fearful avoidant uses to navigate life is being threatened. And they'll go to great lengths to avoid having to feel like that, including the
Yeah.
length of like, hey, this may sabotage the relationship. And I may even know that this is going to sabotage the relationship, but I need to know so that I can adapt and figure out what to do next.
Yeah, that's such a tough position to be in because, like, yeah, if you're dating someone like dismissive avoidant and like you want those answers and you want that certainty, but then you're worried that you're gonna scare them off like a scared little turtle going back into their shell. You don't want to be too overly aggressive or overly, I need to know this right now. So it's so interesting. Like it would be so much easier if everyone knew about attachment theory, and then if you're dismissive avoidant, you kind of see that it's like, hey, I can see my partner, they're not asking for like marriage right now and like a blood contract, but they would like a little bit of certainty or at least a little bit of something to give them a little more assurance. Like, hey, like I move at a slower pace, I'll be honest with you. However, like I can see that you want a bit of security and a little more certainty. So I'm just letting you know, like so far, I think things are going good. I'm not, looking to date other people or whatnot, but I just want to let let's slow things down and just keep on moving towards that direction. So maybe I'm
Yeah.
not saying the DAs are going to do this, and I don't think I did that in the past, but I'm just kind of thinking right now, if a DA knew that an FA was like this, they could sort of give them maybe a little bit of certainty to so they don't
Yeah.
freak out.
It's really specifically, and I want to say two other really important things that you kind of
Yeah.
made me think of. It's really the understanding of what the pattern is or like where it's going that the fearful avoidant needs. And if they know that it's slow moving and the person's just slow moving and that's clear, they can
Yeah.
handle it. If it's quicker moving, they can often handle that too. It's when they don't know what to predict that it becomes really like uncomfortable
Oh,
for fearful
interesting.
avoidant specifically. So to your point, like if somebody said
Yeah.
that, it would be really helpful for a fearful avoidant.
Yeah.
Now, the way out of that, if you are a fearful avoidant listening, is to do nervous system regulation work. The more regulated your nervous system is, the less you're in this space of like hypervigilance. And number two, to make sure that you're able to do core wound work. So if you're reprogramming your core wounds and doing a lot of that reconditioning that we talk all the time about in the personal development school and how important that is, especially for fearful avoidance, then you don't have these fears of like, oh, what if I'm rejected or not good enough, or you're not projecting these fears into the future. And so you're able to just sit with what is without giving it all this meaning that then is going to cause you to feel really dysregulated. And
Mm.
the other thing fearful avoidants will do a lot when they feel like this as a form of sabotage is they will also reject other people before they feel rejected. So if they're not sure and they're trying to read between the lines and they get mixed messages, another really common pattern of behavior of how they sabotage is they'll be like, I'm just gonna like, even if things are going well and
Yeah.
but if they can't predict and they can't read somebody, they'll
Yeah.
do things like, oh, you know what? Hey, send a text message. I just don't want to do this anymore. And I've had a lot of people tell me situations over the years where they did that. And then the person comes back to them and is like, hey, what do you mean? I thought everything was great. And
Yeah.
a lot of it's like that uncertainty of not being able to read somebody that then fires off this response, which is like, I would rather reject the person than deal with the feelings of uncertainty that I'm sitting with and
Yeah.
not have access to like seeing where this is going. And it's a very destabilizing event for fearful avoidance for sure.
Yeah. You know what? I remember you're cueing my memory that I was dating someone at one point. This is a long time ago. And now that I think about it, she must have been FA for sure. And she sort of even told me like, hey, my last relationship like really did a number on me. Like it was not a good ending. I wasn't treated well and it sort of hurt me pretty bad. And I was like, okay, cool. Like I was willing to sort of work with that and not go fast or not really, be aggressive or anything. And I thought on the few days we went out with, our chemistry was amazing. And I was like really looking forward to sort of growing the relationship with this person. I could see though, she was still very, very nervous, but I was like, okay, it might just take some time. But one day she just completely like ghosted me and like dropped me. And I was like, oh man, like I was kind of bummed out because like I said, I thought we were doing pretty good there. But like in hindsight, I can see like even though somebody's telling you, hey, like I'm a good guy, like I'm here to work with you, like I promise I'm not going to do that to you. The fear is just so deep where they're like, no, like I can't. So it makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
I
So do you
hope
want to share that's a good share. Yeah. And that's a
yeah.
very common experience, honestly, for fearful avoidance. I'm sure every fearful avoidant listening, I'm sure if I thought about it, I'd be like, oh yeah, I did that too. I can't think of anything
Yeah.
now on the spot for some reason, um, but it's just very common. I just wanted to pop in here and let you know we are doing a 7-day free trial to the All Access Membership Pass at PDS, which means you get access to literally everything inside of the school. And this includes the 4 live webinars I do with our students every single week. And on top of that, you get access to all of our different courses. We have over 55 different courses on relationships, communication, boundaries, emotional mastery, guilt and shame, learning your needs, so many different facets that are really important to master our lives and feel really good about our lives going forward. And last but not least, there's a daily community event. We have trained facilitators and coaches who are in there doing that work, showing up to support you on your journey every single day. Please join me on the other side. Come check it out. See if it's a fit for you. I'd love to see you there. Go ahead and sign up by clicking the link in the description box below. I'd love to hear the dismissive avoidance side.
Sure. I'll go to my lists here. I don't have a computer brain like Thais, so I got to use my my lists. So the DAs don't plan for the future or like push for like, hey, let's talk about future plans, because generally they're like they don't want to rock the boat. Like they think things are going pretty good right now and there's no big problems.
Don't change what's not working or what is
like,
working. Yeah.
If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Like why are you trying to change something that is actually like pretty good right now? But the thing is, it's good for you. Like for the DA, it feels things are good, but for the other person, as we were talking about the FA, they need a little more certainty. And then for an AP, obviously they're going to want to move a little bit faster. But for the DA, they're just like, no, things are great. Like, why stop trying to ruin this? Like you're going to wreck this if you keep pushing to go faster and faster. So the DA just wants, again, peace. They don't want to like add all these new layers where it's like vulnerability and, oh yeah, at the end of the day, they do think that a long-term committed relationship is probably not going to work out. They think there's going to be something at some point. Maybe the person's going to find out that they're defective. They're going to find out that they're just not, somebody they want to be with. So I think the DA feels safer to like keep it a little bit at an arm's length. So, they have a little more, I guess, control over their feelings and their heart if they keep somebody at a bit of a distance and add a little more of like a casual sort of space. Whereas if they were to plan for the future and then sort of merge with the other person, there's a chance of them being like really, really hurt. And, that they just are trying to avoid that at all costs.
And did you have like a limiting belief, like when you were DA, that was like everything's going to end badly eventually anyways? Or, the more I invest, the more hurt I'll probably be eventually. Like, where did you see yourself in that mix?
Yeah, I could just never picture like a relationship going the distance. But then when I think about it, that's kind of black and white thinking too, where you're like, okay, this is either going to be marriage till death do us part, or this is not going to work. So I guess I never really thought of like, like it going till death do us part, like till I die, basically. Pretty much most of my early partners, I kind of thought this is sort of like a temporary thing.
So
and
would
I remember
you sit there?
go ahead. No, I remember reading in the YouTube comments and I was like, oh, this sounds so sad. Somebody actually wrote, this is from a past video, because I think I expressed this type of sentiment before, and they were saying like a DA might keep you there as like a placeholder almost, because they don't see the future relationship with you, but they're enjoying sort of like the companionship, the connection, the intimacy, stuff like that, but they don't actually picture the future with that person. And that sounds awful, but as we know, DAs tend to like flaw find. So the person that they're actually with right now, they're just always going to think, nah, I don't know if this is the right one. I don't think this is the right person for me. And they're always going to think there's somebody else out there bigger and better for them. So that's kind of the issue as well. Like they're sort of 1 foot in, 1 foot out, where they think, okay, like this is nice and I enjoy this, but I in my feeling is like this is not the one. So I don't want to like commit or go all in with this person because I don't think that they're the one.
And so
So
in retrospect, would you find yourself sitting there and like evaluating your relationships based on this idea of like, is this person the one? Do I see myself living my whole life with this person or not? See yourself kind of like, because it's almost like counterintuitive to what most people think of DAs, like, oh, they're just not even thinking about the future. It's not that you weren't thinking about the future. It was that you were comparing to this kind of like idealized standard ahead of time, like this sort of, do I see myself with this person forever? What does that even look like? And if the answer wasn't like an absolute yes, then you move into flaw finding more immediately.
yeah, I believe so. I think, yeah, due to like sort of societal standards and like family beliefs and whatnot, I always thought, like you have to get married, right? Like you have to be with somebody and start a family and be with them forever. So I think in the back of my mind, there was always that thought of like, okay, is this the person who's going to be there forever? Is this the person that's going to be there forever? But it was just so hard to actually like
Envision
take
that.
that next step or to actually like consider that. I was just like, no, this is not the right person.
Yeah.
So
Prior to learning about attachment styles, did you ever have, like when you were DA, an insight or a moment where you were like, oh, maybe it's me that's shutting down and pushing people away? Or was it always like, oh no, this just isn't the right fit coming externally?
yeah, it was always me thinking that the other person was not the right fit,
So
which
interesting.
is, yeah, it's brutal. Like, again, like I want to disclaimer, like the way I was before, I was not good. Like I was hurting a lot. And because of that, people were hurt in the process. So anything that I share now, I know I don't have to give this disclaimer, but I just feel sometimes when I share like really hurtful things, because I know that people were hurt in the past, like I do have a sense of like kind of feel a little guilty, but I also know that I was kind of operating under as a very hurt person and a very person whose like core wounds were like super deep and
And
kind of
also just in your like support, because I've known you and we've been good friends for a long time, like it's amazing that you can like share these things. Like that's like a level of vulnerability that's like not dismissive avoidant at all. And I hope people see who are listening too, just like it's not easy, to say these things publicly out on the internet in the world and just like be in a space of taking so much ownership for our patterns. But I do think that it's such an amazing sign, like to own something so vulnerably and openly is like such a powerful sign. Like, look, someone's really been doing the work here. So, the
yeah.
hope, and I know why you're sharing it, is the hope that by sharing it, it like helps other people to gain insight into themselves or gain some truth about, oh yeah, this may be the way that a relationship might go unless the person's doing the work. So I admire the fact that you're sharing that in the hope that it helps other people in their journey.
I appreciate that a lot. And yeah, definitely my hope of doing this. And, we've obviously talked about this. The goal of the podcast is just to shed light and help give people awareness and, an insight into hopefully their partner, their loved ones, just to know what might be going on in their head. I still at this point don't feel like I'm being like super vulnerable, but I think as this podcast goes on and on, I'll go
I feel like
deeper.
you're doing a really good job. There's some things I'm like, damn, that was
Really?
vulnerable. Yeah,
That's
for
funny.
sure.
Until I cry on the podcast, we're not there yet. We gotta
For
get Mike to
people,
cry.
for people who are listening, please let us know in the comments if you're listening on YouTube what you think Mike's level of vulnerability has been over the past episodes. I would give it a solid like 8.5. You've shared some real stuff.
Yeah, that's funny. Yeah. Okay. Now,
So going back, is there anything else you would say in terms of those patterns, like why you would struggle to plan for the future or like really invest in the future? Was there anything else that you wanted to say about that?
yeah, one big one, to be honest with you, this one might be a little vulnerable, was I was afraid of like too much expectation for intimacy, to be honest with you. So I really enjoyed like, being with the person, being intimate, whatever. But then I really enjoyed and kind of needed that separation to then want to come back and recommence connection and intimacy and physical touch and stuff like that. And I was always worried that like, oh, well, if I like move in with someone, let's say, I'm going to be expected to like constantly have to like be intimate and like holding and touching all the time and just constantly like I'm not going to get my own sort of space to like basically recover. So I know that was always like a huge sort of worry and concern that if sort of I moved in with someone, there's going to be all these expectations on like how much energy I have to give. And I was just like, oh my God, I don't think I could do that. Like that's going to be crazy. Like I came with an analogy. This might be a terrible analogy, but I'm going to do it anyway. Like, let's say you're someone who's DA and you like eating chocolate cake and, you eat a couple pieces, but then you're like, okay, I'm full. Like that's enough. But then you're with somebody who's on the opposite end of the spectrum, who's anxious. They love chocolate cake and they never get sick of it. So it's like you're being forced to like keep eating chocolate cake, but when you have too much of something, like yeah, you're like enough, like I can't, like please, like stop, enough. So it was something that feels good and amazing and great, but then after a while it becomes like too much. You're just like, please, like this is actually like not fun anymore. Like this is too much. Like I need this recovery time. I need this time to like go back and be by myself, to come back and be able to sort of enjoy the cake again.
Yeah. And if you had to say, so like, and I want to give this for people listening. So things to look for, if you are dating somebody who's fearful avoidant or dismissive avoidant and you're sitting there going, okay, like, is this person healing? Like, is this person doing the work? Because if somebody has totally separate needs in terms of like their bandwidth for intimacy or closeness, and then you're hearing things like this, which are often really true, quite honestly, and you're not alone in that. Like we've had many conversations with DAs and it's the same, like, those same patterns of fearing like, oh my gosh, the expectations when I move in with somebody in terms of like time and energy and emotion and all these things. So when you look at that, what are some key indicators that somebody is doing that work so that bandwidth is increasing, that you want to let people know to really pay attention to or to be on the lookout for when they're vetting a potential partner?
Just someone who can vulnerably share when there's like an area that they're like struggling with. Like if after a while they notice that they're feeling really tired or burnt out because they've been spending too much time together. Like if they can vulnerably say, hey, listen, like I really like you, I like spending time with you, but it turns out that I'm feeling like I need a little bit more of me time. So like, I was wondering if we could, instead of hanging out 3-4 times a week, let's hang out twice a week and take it like that. So it's more in the sense of somebody who's willing to share, like they have a need and then sharing it with their partner, even though it might be like they might be ashamed or feel like they're asking something that's like too much or weird, or they'll be judged negatively on. So I'd say to look for someone who like vulnerably opens up and shares when there's something that's that they're not liking, that's not going well for them, that they that you can tell, like when they share it with you, they're like kind of like really nervous to like open up and share it, but after they share it, like you can receive it and be like, yeah, let's work with that.
Yeah.
Because you never know what's going through the other person's head, right? Like if they don't tell you, like, and it's really tough because some people can struggle with something for days, months, years, and longer, right? So it's not until you tell someone. So that for me, that's like the biggest thing, is seeing that somebody can actually open up on something vulnerable and that they're a little bit like, just feel a little bit like nervous to share, but then they're doing it anyway because they care about the relationship and they care about themselves. So
yeah. And I think to add to that too, like that's such an important point. And then also, and it's a great sign, right? Because it's an indicator that the person's willing to be vulnerable, which is a huge step of the dismissive avoidant towards becoming more secure. And B, the biggest reason that most avoidant attachment styles, be it fearful avoidant and dismissive avoidant, tend to leave relationships is they have a buildup of unmet needs that they're not communicating. So then all of a sudden they feel like, okay, I have to run and like go take space. So that's such a huge piece. And then also, the dismissive avoidant, not just being able to communicate and be more vulnerable, but also spend a little bit more time co-regulating. There's a huge piece too, where if you can be around that person, and the dismissive avoidant can share like smaller boundaries. So things like, instead of canceling the plans on Friday evening because they don't feel 100% like themselves, or like, hey, I don't feel 100% like myself. I don't want to cancel the plans, but can we just stay in and watch a movie and just have some quiet time and just take it easy? So you also want to look for, like, is this person able to let me in when they are regulating? So are they able to, even if they don't feel 100% optimal, are they willing to say, I don't want to go out for dinner and, have all this, like, this pressure on that, but I want to be able to, hey, let's just stay in and watch a movie and just have some quiet time or some peace. So being able to communicate that, I think, is really important in terms of co-regulation. And Ds will get better and better at this the more that they are also being able to stop shaming themselves. The less they shame themselves, the more they feel a sense of acceptance, and the less they have to hide to re-regulate, and the more they can start re-regulating around people they feel are accepting them. So the more that people are being accepting in terms of how they give feedback, or being just more thoughtful and mindful about how you communicate, but seeing that should coincide, if you're vetting somebody, with them actively lowering their walls. If you just, if you just expect them to not shame themselves, but then you're not giving healthy communication, then obviously that's not going to really help move the needle forward. But, in the reverse end, if you're trying to communicate in the best way possible and you're doing everything from your end, and you don't see the dismissive avoidant getting better at being more vulnerable as a result, being more open and letting you in more, and if you're not seeing the needle move, then again, that's like probably a pretty good indicator somebody may not be doing that work to move towards more of a secure attachment style.
Yeah, 100%. I love that point too you made about how somebody shows up when sort of stuff hits the fan. So let's say, for example, you're DA and then things at work are just like crazy and you're working crazy hours or whatever. Well, this season of your work might last like 4 months, 6 months. Does that mean you're going to like just ignore your partner completely? But for the DA, they're thinking like, I don't have the give. Like I'm just burning myself at both ends. And like, this is really hard for me. But you have to tell your partner like what's going on with you, how you're feeling, and then try to, like you said, co-regulate. So you're not going to be going back to your partner and maybe giving 100% that you could, but just let them know, hey, like I'm really operating at like low energy right now. So can we just, I still want to see you. Can we just do something really low key, or can we, do something where it's not, active or outside? Like, can we just watch a movie or something like that? So I think it's really important, when to see how people show up when sort of emergency situations happen. Because if they just completely like forget about you and just say like, okay, I can't talk to you right now. Like, I'll talk to you when this passes. Well, it might not pass for quite a long time, right? So it's not fair to your partner. So as you said, like, but it's on the other foot to know that your partner is okay with, hey, I see that you're really stressed right now, and that's okay. And we don't have to do the usual things we do, X, Y, Z. We can do things a little more easy and mild. Like, so it's like, hey, let's work with this together, instead of just the person making the unilateral decision. I'm busy, I cannot do anything right now. So yeah, I love.
And that's like a normal part of like healthy, secure relationships, is to be in a place where like you're able to attune to each other, see when each other are going through particularly difficult times or challenging moments, and actually like pivot a little bit. That's part of what co-regulation is the ability to say, okay, you know what, this person has a lot of stress at work. Maybe because they need time to recharge more, we'll do more quiet things. We'll do more like introverted things. Or, oh, you know what? This person is in a place where their work's back to normal. We've just been doing quiet things. Oh, we want to go out more and do more activities together. And now's a great time for that other person to move the other direction. And so much of like secure relating is about being able to like attune to each other, talk openly about your needs, see where each other are at, and have those conversations to make those healthy compromises in the middle. And that's where you see a lot of that momentum. So
One last thing too, is funny. When I first heard of co-regulation, I was like so turned off by it, because I was thinking it's like you and your partner holding hands and like doing deep breathing together, and like this is how you co-regulate. I had just like totally wrong idea of sort of what co-regulation would be like.
okay, so should I explain that? Is that what you're saying?
Okay, yeah. For anybody who's thinking, like, if somebody's listening and they're like, what does that mean, co-regulation with my partner? Like, I kind of need my space when I'm really stressed out. Like, what would co-regulation look like? Yeah, if you want to give 1 or 2 examples.
Yeah, so what it is it's actually the ability to like put all of our cards out on the table and share what our needs are, what our feelings are, as well as actually be able to be present enough with each other that you can attune to each other and
Yeah.
actually like, hear those things and take them in, and then find these healthy compromises that create a middle ground. So the idea is there's attunement, there's the ability to communicate openly and share, or vulnerability, you could say as the second ingredient, and then the ability to slightly modify our behaviors to help support each other. And so, an example might be, let's say I see my husband come home from doing something, I'm really attuned to him. So if I see him come in and I can tell he's like not in a good mood or he's stressed out, I would be able to say like, hey, are you good? Like, what's going on? And check in and then see like maybe he needs support in some way. Maybe he's like overwhelmed and I can do something to like take a little bit of weight off of him in that moment. Or maybe, if you have a more anxious leaning individual, you give them a hug or you give them encouragement, so we're able to just make small shifts in our behaviors to support that person in whatever it is that they're going through. It doesn't mean that like you have to turn your life upside down and like quit your job because someone's going through a hard time. It's really about these small modifications that can allow somebody else to be supported in their ability to regulate. And so whether that's like giving advice or bouncing ideas around or just giving encouragement or validation or giving a hug, like all of those things would be examples of how we can shift our behaviors to really support each other. And if we aren't able to be vulnerable, we're not able to receive co-regulation because we're not sharing. We may even show that we're upset or stressed, but then when somebody asks us, we're like, no, it's fine. And so then what's gonna end up happening is if we're not vulnerable enough to receive co-regulation, which is obviously typical of dismissive avoidance the most, but fearful avoidance too, then you end up feeling like you can only be alone when you have to re-regulate. So if you're not able to share and open your inside world to somebody and receive support or ask for what you need, then every time you feel stressed, you need to escape people so you can go figure it out instead of being comfortable to be around people and be able to actually share and receive. So yeah, hopefully that.
And like you said, I think before, like the shame piece, you got to just throw that shame piece out the window. Everybody has points in their life where they're sort of, just like, oh my God, just like losing their mind. But, you got to put your shame aside and tell your partner what's going on and what you could best need at this moment. And especially for partners of the DA, like you mentioned the term small modifications. So it's not like the DA needs to do all this, like take over all your load and be like, oh my gosh, it's just these small little things that are going to help you feel better. And I really think what helps the DA is if you tell them, I know it would be nice if they just kind of knew what you needed, but just to give them a few things like, hey, like work's been like really tough right now. What would be so helpful is if you could keep saying dishes. We got to get a better example than the dishes, but like if you could,
the garbage,
the
garage.
All the Canadians out there, if you could brush the snow off my car in the morning so I don't have to go outside in the freezing cold and get to work comfortably. Just like small stuff like that, you know what I mean? Just to let your partner know these small modifications that are needed at this point in time, because we're all going to go through it. We're all going to have these seasons where we're sort of, chaos happens or things unexpected happen. And you just, like you said, need to put your cards on the table and let your partner know, hey, vulnerably, this is where I'm at. And I could use a little bit of help in this area. So yeah, those are amazing.
So the summer is coming to a close, and now it's time to welcome in probably our much busier season. And if you're anything like me, the last place you probably want to be spending time is figuring out what to eat for dinner and standing in long grocery store lines. So you can make life easier with HelloFresh, which is America's #1 meal kit. With fresh ingredients and simple recipe cards delivered straight to your door, HelloFresh takes care of all of your meal planning, shopping, and meal prep. And I really can't express how much time HelloFresh has actually saved me each and every week. What I love most is the variety. So whether you're looking for fit and wholesome or quick and easy, vegetarian, or even family-friendly options, their ever-changing recipes keep food exciting when it comes to dinner and never leave me feeling like I'm making the same meals and just eating the same food over and over again. So if you're ready to save time and make cooking much more enjoyable for you and your loved ones, you can go for free breakfast for life at HelloFresh.com/free Thais. That's THAIS. And you'll get one free breakfast item per box while your subscription is active. That's free breakfast for life just by going to hellofresh.com/free Thais, THAIS. Okay, so I want to change gears here and talk about another topic that came up. There was actually a question that came up from the YouTube comments specifically and was directed to Mike. And I think it's a really important topic to hear from the DA perspective, FA perspective, and we'll talk about AP as well, which is what are the most common reasons that a dismissive avoidant attachment style will heal or start to do the work? And what was your personal experience around that, Mike? And then we'll talk about some common patterns of DAs in general and FAs and APs in general as well.
For sure. Okay, so probably a few things. I was sort of tired of always seeing like other people like being emotional, to be honest with you. Like people were really caring of each other and warm and friendly. And, I'd see some of my friends and their families at like family functions or whatnot. And they just seem so like loving to each other and just like expressive and things like that. So I was like, I kind of felt like a bit of a robot. I was like, oh man, like I don't really like emote a lot, and like crying was really hard, even though I was super sensitive person. But as soon as that like sort of comes up in front of anybody, like just stuff it down. So I was like, this can't be good, like to always just sort of fight your emotions and sort of like push them down when they come up. Like there's a price for that for sure. And then just wanted to be more loving, like literally like feel like a more loving person, and like not being always worried about myself, and sort of wanting to like, care about someone else and do things for someone else and just make sure somebody else is okay, and not just kind of live life for like me. Like it was always sort of about me, and just like, because I was kind of in, low level fight or flight. It was like survival. So it was always, my whole life was based around just what I wanted to do, what I needed. And I just didn't really want to care for anybody outside of me too deeply.
And it's so hard when you're in survival mode to feel like there's room to care. I mean, if you're in this like chronic survival state, and people can probably relate to this, even if they're not dismissive avoidant, or even fearful avoidant, like if even an anxious attachment style has ever been in a space of burnout, like when you're in a place of burnout and somebody's like, hey, can you like add all these things to your plate? Can you do these things? You're like, I can't, I don't have the bandwidth. And I almost feel like when we talk about like DAs being in survival state, it's almost like they're in this kind of chronic emotional burnout because that bandwidth isn't there. They're not regulated. And so, I mean, it makes sense that you felt like that because you're in this space of just going, wait, this is all that I have room for is myself, because I am in this sort of burnout survivalistic space. So anyways, what else were you going to add in there?
Yeah, no, another one was just like all of my relationships literally had like clockwork would be like 1 to 2 years, and it would be like, then it would be over. And I was like, why is that? Like they just go to the 1 to 2 year mark, and then like clockwork, they end. And then I was realizing that like that was around the time where the power struggle phase sort of comes in. And, whereas before things were pretty easy breezy, there's not a lot of, your partner's not really like bringing up a lot of things that they're not happy with or things that they want. Like there's not a lot of, your partner's not asking for like their needs to be met, basically. Like they're just kind of happy to be there until it hits power struggle. We're like, okay, like I'm going to need a few things here. Like I need to know, what's happening with the future. I need to know what's happening. Like you could tell that they were keeping their kind of biting their tongue and not really speaking up for themselves. And again, like I said on past episodes, a lot of FAs that I dated. So I think they were really afraid to like share what they wanted and needed. They didn't want to look weak or like be too vulnerable. So anyway, it was very like, whoa, like what is this? Like this is not the person that I know. Like you want this now, you want this now. Like it was all these things. Like it seemed like they wanted just so many things that I just couldn't deliver on and didn't want to deliver on. And I would just kind of like remove myself from the situation usually at that point and just feel like I can't do this. This is not going to work out. So yeah, after like a decade or like 15 years of doing this type of relationships, I'm like, there's got to be something going on here. Like it's not always the other person. Like there's something going on in me that's leading to these exact same patterns. So yeah, that was probably one of the biggest ones. I sort of had something I was thinking about while I was researching for this podcast as well. What's so important and what I know now is like you have to make a list of what you want in a relationship. Because if you don't know what you want, you're actually going to not know when it's like right in front of you. For DAs, because DAs are so busy kind of flaw finding and looking for reasons of why it won't work out, they're actually not focused on what's actually in front of them. So, for example, let's say I made a list of like traits that I wanted in a partner: kind, intelligent, humorous, independent, trustworthy, consistent, allows me to have free time. So, these are all the things I would want in my perfect relationship. Well, if I were to stop and then look at my current relationship back then, be like, hey, my partner is kind, she's intelligent, she is funny, she has her independence, trustworthy, good communicator, and actually like gives me my free time when I need it. So it was like this person who has all
That's
these
an
amazing qualities.
amazing exercise.
They're right in front of me, but like because I was so focused on the other stuff that it's like, no, but this person doesn't have this, or they don't have that, or all this other thing, that you're not seeing that other half of it. And then it's like, wow, like this person has all these great qualities. Is actually choosing me and wants to be with me. So it's like I
Okay.
should be, wow.
Can we just like go here for a second? Like this is
Yeah.
so good. And I want you to come back to everything else you're going to say, but I just want to
Yeah.
pause here for a second because I think that's such an incredible exercise for DAs because one of the things that and when we know, but want to share with everybody is that like dismissive avoidance, they'll make mountains out of molehills, right? They'll flaw find as a means of self-protection and they'll project all these things into the future. And I've seen things as small as people being like, oh my gosh, it's a deal breaker because this girl that I have been dating for months left her makeup all over the counter. It just can't work. And like, you're like, wait, everything else is amazing. You can just go have a conversation about the makeup on the counter. And it's like, they'll make things that are fully solvable problems through communication into unsolvable problems. And some of that's just coming from this subconscious fear and space of self-protection. So I just want to like highlight that because that's incredible. What a great exercise for anybody who's a dismissive avoidant listening is do that. Do what Mike said, like take the time to be like, what do I want ahead of time? So that as you're working on your stuff, as you're working on your attachment style, you're able to actually see when somebody's showing up with all of those traits in front of you. And rather than focusing on like the little things that are there, and I would always, when I was in practice working with people, I would always ask dismissive avoidant clients, I would be like, is this a solvable problem? When they would say, they'd be like, oh, I can't do something because of this. And I'd be like, well, if that's solvable through communication. And if the answer is yes, go communicate. And then they would start seeing the needle move and improvement. So I think that's really good to keep in mind. But I would really pair that with look at what you need and what you're looking for in the ideal relationship first. Write a list exactly like Mike did. I think that's fantastic. And then when you're in that flaw finding mode, that's your checkpoint. That's your reference point. Hold on a second. Is it me flaw finding? And you'll know because if all these traits are showing up in a person and this person's amazing, and then there's these little things, and then you check into and you're like, and is this a solvable problem, the thing I'm flaw finding about? That will help you stay on track. I think that's amazing. That's such a great exercise.
Yeah, when I was doing the research, I was thinking, oh my gosh, sort of like an aha moment, because it's like because I know for myself, just in my own, how I felt about myself, I was always looking at what was wrong with me, what was not good about me. And I was ignoring completely what was amazing about me, all these great qualities I have. So it wasn't until I made that shift to like put my focus on what I do have and not what I don't. But I think you can apply that to relationships as well. Like if your focus is on what's not right in another person, yeah, you're going to see that stuff constantly. And as it comes up, you're going to see it and go, oh, there's another thing. Oh, there's another thing about the relationship that's not good. But if you shift that focus, and I know you've talked about the RAS before, you'll start to see like, whoa, like my partner actually has some amazing qualities and like is pretty darn good to me. So I think it's important to make that list, but also honor your non-negotiables. If there are things in the relate, and you touched on it, is this problem solvable? If it's a non-negotiable and you've wrote out your non-negotiables, like this person, I don't know, does drugs and you're really drug free and can't really tolerate that, you shouldn't bend on that. And that's probably something that's not gonna, bode well in the future. So you kind of need to be real with yourself and leave if it's a non-negotiable that's there.
And that's that balance. It's like have your non-negotiables, be clear about what's not okay. And that's, I think a lot of people, when we talk about non-negotiables, are always like, well, what are some examples? And it's really individual. Like for somebody who's vegan, it's like, oh, maybe it's dating other vegans, or some people who are non-vegan. Maybe it's not dating anybody who's vegan, or some like the obvious ones, like having kids, not having kids. Like there's some obvious ones there. But it's your deal breakers in a relationship, where if you try to stay in the relationship, despite the non-negotiable being an evident thing, you would be betraying yourself and your authentic truth to try to be with this person. And so that's what a non-negotiable really is. And knowing your non-negotiables, but then also knowing the things you're truly looking for, your standards, your needs, the traits and characteristics, that I think is a great sort of balancing exercise that can help, especially a dismissive avoidant, but also really good for fearful avoidance too, by the way, because fearful avoidance also flaw find, but really helps.
Before we get into FAs, I know I'm dominating the DA part of this.
It's great. I love it.
Before I forget, and then I want to hear sort of why you chose to do your healing journey as well. But while we're on the topic, you said you should ask, is this problem solvable? I think DAs should go a step beyond that, because I think some DAs would be like, no, it's not solvable, and not even go there. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I would say maybe, is it solvable? B, have you tried solving it with your partner?
Have you communicated it? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Because if you just say, is that solvable? I think some people would be like, no, like they'll feel disempowered, and they'll feel like, no, I don't think this person would change, or I don't think they'd accept that about me. So they're making that decision themselves and not really involving the other person. So I think before you leave after saying, is that solvable, you say, have I had a conversation about this with my partner? Yeah. Then, is it solvable? No, maybe the partner's saying, no bueno, this is not going to work. But I think before you say, is this solvable, you need to sort of, enact both parties in the conversation. But
that's great.
And then last but not least, I was so tired of being afraid of my emotions. So we talked about me not like feeling like a robot, not able to feel. Well, also I was afraid of my emotions. I said I wanted to feel, but as soon as some feelings came up, I was like, oh my God, like this is not comfortable. Like just like panic sometimes. So it was actually wanting to be more comfortable with emotions. And, being vulnerable helps with that, because if you open up, you're going to start to feel sort of some emotions come up, and some maybe intense feelings that you're not used to. But that was another big thing where I was like, I'm tired of feeling kind of scared of like everything. Like I was scared of just like so many different things out of my comfort zone. And that feeling of emotions coming up would like have me heading for the hills. So I was kind of tired of like running from everything, because I think for DAs to do this work is pretty brave. So, if you're tired of sort of being scared of a lot and being afraid of your own emotions, there's definitely some work you'll want to do to like help that, because otherwise life's like uncomfortable all the time. I'm not saying it's 100% never uncomfortable now. I still have my moments where I'm like anxious, nervous, uncomfortable, but it doesn't like dominate. It doesn't dictate how I'm going to do things. It's not like, oh, I can't do that. It makes me uncomfortable. Like I'll still do things and try to push the comfort zone. Whereas before, as soon as the uncomfortableness came up, back in the turtle shell.
That's a really good share. So is there anything else you wanted to share? Because I'll do a little bit from like the AP and FA perspective too.
No, that's perfect. Yeah, I want to hear about the FAs and the APs. Go ahead.
Okay, good stuff. So that was really great.
So I have some really exciting news, and it's that integrated attachment theory training is back. In other words, you can be trained to become a relationship coach certified in integrated attachment theory in literally 60 days. So who is this for? Well, of course, this is for any individual who wants to make an impact and really be of service to others while also obtaining freedom and flexibility and abundance in their lives. And this is also for anybody who's already a counselor, a therapist, a coach, and just really wants to expand their toolkit. We've had so many people enter into the integrated attachment theory program because they're just looking to obtain a certain degree of mastery in terms of understanding their own attachment patterns, and also the attachment patterns of maybe their children or partner or other loved ones in their lives, so they can really support those people and understand them more deeply. Now, please keep in mind that the last 2 times we ran this program, we filled up very fast. In fact, we oversold the programs and sold out completely. So if you're interested, click the link below to learn more and dive in with me. And I'd love to see you on the other side before seats run out.
Here's a few things. So the anxious attachment style, a lot of like the things that will make them want to show up and do the work will be related to obviously feeling like there are failed relationships and feeling like, and a lot of APs, because they are emotionally unavailable to themselves. Like, think about it. If you're AP listening, if you constantly are choosing other people before yourself and you're putting yourself last and you're disowning your feelings, your needs, the things that are meaningful or important to you, well, then you're basically in this chronic state of disregarding yourself, your truth. And so what happens, unfortunately, and I think this is something that can't be understated, and obviously we talk about this a lot, but what happens is then the subconscious mind tries to choose people to invest in that are familiar. And it sees familiarity as safety and thus survival. And ultimately, the mind is survival wired first. So what ends up taking place is that a lot of anxious attachment styles, they'll think consciously, okay, I want to like vet better. I want to pick the right partner. I want to date somebody who's emotionally available. I want to date somebody who's ready for a relationship. And then their conscious mind will say this, and your conscious mind is responsible for 3 to 5% of all of your beliefs and thoughts and emotions and actions. And your subconscious mind, which is responsible for 95 to 97%, will choose people who treat you the way you treat yourself, because that's what's most comfortable and familiar. So if you constantly put yourself last, you constantly, put your feelings and needs on the back burner, you're going to pick people who will mirror that back to you. And a lot of people will be like, but Thais, how do they even know that? Well, funnily enough, your conscious mind takes in roughly 40 to 60 bits per second of data, while your subconscious and unconscious collectively take in up to 1 billion bits per second of data. So all of this information we're building about somebody, from like their micro expressions and body language and tone of voice, all of this information we're taking in about somebody, only a tiny, tiny, tiny bit of it is actually making it to our conscious level of mind, where we're actually able to critically think and analyze our experiences. And so, we will find all of these data points that aren't making it to our conscious mind about how available somebody is through things like their micro expressions or body language or tone of voice or their patterns between text messages or phone calls, or how much or how little they share with us in their words. Like, there's so many things. And in fact, communication is like, I think it's 93.7% nonverbal. So we're taking in so much information about somebody and getting such a deep, rich impression about somebody, with only a tiny, tiny tidbit of that making it to our logical thinking, analytical self. And so, a lot of times what will prompt anxious attachment styles to finally come in to do the work is that they're sick of feeling like, why do I keep ending up in these failed relationships? Why do I keep ending up with people who are not ready for a relationship, or who I think everything's going great and suddenly they shut down, or who I end up accidentally pushing them away? Because sometimes it's the pacing of moving things so rapidly that also even causes at times secure people to get a bit nervous. So it's that. But I bring that up because the most important thing for an anxious attachment style is that they show up and they learn to meet the needs of themselves. And a lot of anxious attachment styles, they come in to do the work and they come to watch these videos. And it's a big part of the reason we put so much content about avoidant attachment styles and fearful avoidance, because that's what anxious attachment styles ask for the most, because they want to learn about the other people. But at the same time, there has to be the anxious attachment style to recondition your own subconscious comfort zone. So you start investing in and choosing more secure partners. There has to be that I will learn about myself. I will learn about my needs and my boundaries. I will start meeting them within myself and attuning to myself and actually upholding my standards in relationships and communicating them to other people. And when that work starts to get done, that's where the anxious attachment styles start to see a lot of their relationships shifting and changing. So they start investing in the right people and nurturing the right relationships long term. So I don't know if you want to add anything there, but that's sort of just our quick little summary for APs.
No, that makes total sense for APs. From a lot of the comments from the people I've met who are AP, they're just like, I don't want to date avoidance anymore. Like, please help me. All I'm dating is dismissive avoidance. And you just summed up all the reasons why right there. So, APs, you got to just go inwards. I know you're trying to reach out for connection as much as you can, but it's actually going inside and spending some time with yourself and really, really getting to know yourself. And I know it's probably in the beginning, it's going to feel a lot of resistance and be like, oh, this is a waste of time. Like, I could be connecting with my partner. I could be connecting with my friends, my family. Like, there's going to be like a pull for you to like not want to do it. But just the more you do it, just like meditation, at first it's very ants in your pants. You'll want to just jump out of your seat. But just know it's something that once you start doing and doing it a little more, it just gets easier and easier. So I can imagine for APs just the thought of doing sort of inner work and spending time by themselves and journaling and doing all this sort of like solo things probably just gives them anxiety just thinking about that. But slowly but surely it becomes easier and easier, and then once you get to secure, then you're running the show and you're choosing the best partners possible for yourself. So
yeah.
Yeah.
And it's a big part of why you see securely attached individuals end up in other relationships with securely attached individuals, is their subconscious comfort zone is people who will communicate and show up because they do those things in the relationship to self first. So the real hack or trick towards to like getting into thriving relationships that will last isn't people pleasing better or just simply understanding everybody more. It's great to understand other attachment styles because we can like consider their pain points and their barriers, and that can help improve our communication and understanding of each other's needs. But if we only use that without doing the inner work, then you'll hit a glass ceiling and you'll find yourself still investing in these kind of like relationships where maybe somebody's not willing to show up and do the work because maybe at a deeper level, the real truth is that you're not showing up to do the work for yourself either. And so again, you'll see that be that sort of connecting point. So anyway, so fearful avoidance, some of the big things and the most general themes you'll see is fearful avoidance definitely hit rock bottoms. They're definitely, if you're fearful avoidant listening, you probably know that you've been through your own rock bottom in various forms. And you'll find that like those rock bottoms are usually the prompters for growth. I find fearful avoidants kind of like go deep, hit those rock bottoms, and then kind of are like the phoenix rising from the ashes in a lot of cases where they'll really get nitty gritty, like super into the work as well, which is great. Like a lot of fearful avoidants, because of that all or nothing dynamic, will sort of operate in extremes. And sometimes that can be beneficial in various ways. Like I always think the balanced middle ground is always the best way to be coming from. But sometimes when you are coming from no work and not doing anything, and then you learn about like personal growth and the relationship to yourself and attachment styles, and that you can recondition your subconscious patterns and really heal and change these things. Sometimes all of a sudden it's like, oh, I'm going to go head first in, dive in and like really run into it and just push and grow and push and grow. And that can be really, really beneficial and meaningful. So a lot of things will be like failed relationships, really painful moments, maybe really painful coping mechanisms that are no longer serving you. And having these kind of wake up calls, the realization like, okay, this is not working for me any longer. And now it's time to do the work. And for anybody who follows this channel a lot, there's like 5 main pillars that you have to be able to move through to become secure. 1 is reprogramming core wounds. 2 is learning to actually meet your own needs. It's a big part of self-soothing and self-regulation. 3 is learning to actually regulate your nervous system function through breath work or meditation or daily habits like that really help with somatic processing and nervous system regulation. And then number 4, learning to have healthy boundaries. And number 5, learning to communicate your needs to other people so you can actually receive. And, a lot of those, they can't just be realizations you have consciously. They have to be subconscious work done. They have to be things that you're patterning in and habituating. Otherwise, we just intellectualize things and they don't move the needle for us. So those are really 5 pillars for FAs, for APs, for DAs. And yeah, go for it.
Now, before we let you off the hook, though, I want to know what sort of was there something that what happened over and over in your relationships where you're like, this is enough. I can't deal with this anymore. I got to do this inner work. Was there anything that pops into your head that sort of was like, okay, this is the straw that broke the camel's back. I got to change.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, for me, and lots of people know who watch this channel, like my backstory, but for me, honestly, it was a lot more than just an attachment style issue. Like I had a lot of issues with sobriety and addiction. And like, I've told this story so many times on this channel, I won't tell it in full again because it'll just take a lot of space and you can research about it on YouTube and hear more. But yeah, for me, it was, I hit a rock bottom in my own life. Like I was like sick and tired of struggling and constantly telling myself I was going to do things differently and I was going to get sober and I was going to change my life and stop having these destructive patterns, and then just falling back into the same hole over and over and over and over again. And it was driving me insane. It's a very tormenting thing to experience, honestly. And so that for sure was a huge piece. And then finding myself just going through like destructive relationships, like things that were chaotic, things where even if I really cared about somebody, I knew I wasn't showing up in a healthy way. And if I'm really honest, I didn't realize that at the beginning. I did, sort of similar to what you were saying earlier. Like, even though looking back after doing the work and healing, I can look back on the relationships I was in at a younger age and be like, damn, I was the chaotic one. Like I was the one that was
That was the
bringing
problem.
chaos. Yeah, chaos into the relationships. But at the time, what was really happening internally for me was that I had tons of core wounds from childhood, tons of fears of being trapped or betrayed or abandoned or helpless or not wanting to rely on anybody or, being weak if I open up and I'm vulnerable. So I had all these core wounds that were causing me to have extremely dysfunctional patterns of communication, did not know how to communicate for the life of me, did not know how to solve arguments or disagreements,
Mhm.
and was triggered by so many things all the time. And
Yeah.
so it was this perfect storm. And because I would be triggered by other people's behaviors, which in reality were actually just often catalysts for my own core wounds to be triggered. It was partially behavior sometimes, but mostly that small behaviors could trigger big things for me because I had a lot of wounds within me in my
Mhm.
subconscious mind. So I would get really triggered by other people, and I could only see how it was their fault. I could only see this person's hurting me. And so I know we've talked about this on here before, but I think it's important to recognize, for me, because I would be so triggered by someone else, I thought that all bets were off. Like, oh, you hurt me, I can respond however, and you're still the one in the wrong. And
Mhm.
it took a lot of growth and healing and accountability for me, which ultimately I'm so grateful that I went down that path. But it took a lot of accountability for me to be able to realize oh, I'm getting really triggered sometimes by even small things. I'm not communicating about them in healthy ways at all. So I'm not giving
Mhm.
any room for them to actually be resolved. And then I'm becoming volatile in my expression of things, it's making accusations like you don't care that I have boundaries, or you don't this, or you don't that, being really critical in my communication to people because I had no idea of how to communicate in healthy ways that would actually get me heard. So it
Yeah.
was sort of okay, I was expressing in unhealthy ways. I was getting really triggered by often smaller things. I wasn't really setting boundaries or giving opportunity for relationships to grow anyways. And so, yeah, reflecting on wow, I have work to do started for me this 3.5, 4 year journey of and I'm not saying everybody should do this. I had a lot of work to do, but I didn't date anybody at all for very long. For that whole 3 year period or so, 3.5 year period, I was just focus on myself, just focus on my own work, and really went deep in the relationship to me,
Mhm.
which in hindsight too is a little bit avoidant because I probably could have done a year or two and then tried to go back out into the world, but it served me well because I'm glad the
Yeah.
way things worked out for me. But yeah, I really had to be accountable that just because I'm hurt by other people's behavior doesn't give me the um free for all or the ability to just
Yeah.
talk however I want towards people or push people away in these extremes, thinking yeah, I should be pushing away in really extreme ways because of your small behavior. No, how I react to somebody also has a huge impact on the relationship.
Yeah.
So yeah, so that's that was
That's
a big
amazing.
part of where I did the work
No,
for
that's
sure.
great. I know your story and I've heard it in the past or whatnot, but just hearing it again, that's amazing. You went from so when you look back at your old self, you must be like, holy crap, that's a totally different person. The
I
amount of
guarantee, yeah, I guarantee there's people who I grew up around. Well, I mean, I still have some friends that I grew up with that knew me as this really chaotic
yeah,
person,
yeah,
chaotic and impulsive and all the things. And yeah, and it's I feel when I share things on YouTube now or whatever, there's this only side of me where it's after I've done the work. But
yeah,
yeah, had a lot of work to do, and hopefully for anybody who is fearful, avoidant, feeling oh my goodness, I have so much work to do. There's so much chaos and kind of trauma in my conditioning and programming. I promise, if you stick with it and you're consistent, it's repetition and emotion that reprograms. So the more you leverage that, you can make things work. You can create change at a deep level that will stick as long as you have the right tools and as long as you're able to remain consistent with them.
That's awesome. Inspirational. One big thing I just want to pluck out of that as well. Like it sounds like you literally went from like victim mentality to like radical accountability, which is amazing. Because now that I feel like I've done the work and I try to take as much accountability as I can, when I see somebody in like victim mode and victim mindset, and some of them are my friends, and some of them are people that I talk to, once in a while, and it's so hard for me, and it sort of like hurts my heart where I'm like, you have so much power and control and ability to like radically change your life when you stop sort of trying to figure out who's the bad guy, who's doing this, who's doing that. Like if you turn that back to yourself and just focus, kind of go all in on your own healing and what you can control and sort of how you can heal your own core wounds, that will yield the most amount of change. And like it can't help but not. Once you do the inner work, then the outer world changes. Those things that actually were like causing you a lot of problems before tend to like fall away. And then as we talked about, the subconscious comfort zone has been changed. So those things are like oil and water now. Like you're not even gonna like go near that kind of stuff anymore. It'll just feel like so like wrong and like not, not for your best, for your highest good. And you'll just be so resistant to the stuff that you used to, kind of live in and put up with and be around a lot. So just wanted to point out, like, that's amazing how you went from sort of victim mentality to like radical accountability, and we see all the changes that it gave to you. So that's amazing.
Thank you. And I think that's such an important topic is like people can be victimized by things, right? Because I can imagine there's people listening being like, but I went through so much and I, this
Sure.
and that, and it's true. But a lot of the things you're victimized by, they're not your fault and they're still your responsibility. And it sucks in a way because it's not fun to know that like if you had a really, really difficult upbringing or you had like a really traumatic event happen at different times throughout your life, it's not fun to be like, oh man, I have to take full responsibility. But honestly, like having compassion for what you went through to yourself and being able to honor your emotions and feelings is a really important first step. But the other side of this is, and you have to take full accountability, because until you do, you'll just stay chained to your past. You'll just stay like in this invisible prison of your past experiences that your subconscious reprojects out everywhere else. And it's such an important part of healing. And it's such an important shift in mindset. And for sure, I was like growing up when I was a teenager, I was like, nobody knows what it's like to go, like I had all these like stories and all these things and yeah, it's just so important to shift that mindset. So
Totally. Yeah. You don't want to like sort of ignore and just like discount anything you went through. Those things were huge and created a huge impact on you. But as we look at your life story, like, would you say that if all those things didn't happen, you wouldn't have got to where you are today? Like probably not even close to where you are today. Is that accurate?
yeah, one exercise I want to encourage people to do, because sometimes difficult traumatic events also like breed a lot of resilience and depth and a lot of like really powerful characteristics in people. And there's a lot of research in post-traumatic growth. And there's a great exercise anybody can do at home who like feels like they're stuck in victim mindset, or feels like maybe they've been doing the work on taking accountability and has started to do a lot of work on themselves. It can be really meaningful at these sort of like junction points or inflection points in your healing journey. And that's something I did is I sat down one day and this brings up like a deep topic, but I used to be so scared of pain. Like, oh no, pain, like it's such a bad thing. And it's not that I'm sitting here like, yay for pain. Like obviously pain sucks. We can all agree on that. But pain brings really powerful lessons. And pain, sometimes when you're not learning lessons in their easy form in front of you, pain will poke you and prod you until you learn the lesson, and it's waking you up. It's a wake-up call a lot of the time. And so while pain isn't comfortable and isn't fun, sometimes it's really meaningful. And so one day I sat down and did this exercise. I looked at like some of the biggest things that I held on to, like the things I was like, this was an injustice, or I was really mad or angry about these things. And I sat down and I asked myself, what did I learn from this? How did I grow from this? What did this make me let go of that maybe no longer was serving me? And what like traits came out of this in me as a person that were like useful and meaningful in my own like development and future? And by the end of doing that and sitting with each like experience and really deeply like kind of meditating on those questions, like really sitting with them and really introspecting, like I was like, it was so healing for me to be like, oh my
Yeah.
goodness, some of the hardest things in my life brought me the most powerful lessons that I'm actually so grateful for now and shaped me in a way that I'm like so truly like grateful for as a person. And by doing that, it changed my relationship with pain. It made me not see pain as this like exclusively negative thing that should be avoided at all costs. It made me see like, oh, this is actually meaningful. Or if something painful is in front of me, okay, what is it trying to show me? Like, what can I take away from this? What is the lesson I can learn to fast track the growth out of this? And by doing that, you sort of move into more of a rapid personal growth space with all the challenges
Yeah.
that come in front of you. So I think it's a great exercise for people to practice.
Yeah, I love that. That's all amazing. Yeah. Congrats on all your growth.
Or I feel like now I'm just like, yay, like
Yeah,
there's
you
still
deserve it. You gotta be your own cheerleader and give yourself those props for the work you put in. No, that's all great information, and I hope everybody can get a chance to do that exercise because it is really powerful. So
yeah, and it's a great exercise just for people to like shift that relationship to pain as a whole. And it doesn't
yeah,
mean things won't be hard or you don't have hard moments or things like that, but it's just that will make it a lot easier than what it is when we have the mindset that's like, oh no, pain is really bad and often scary.
yeah. Someone was teaching me to like try not to look at things as good and bad. When we see things as good and bad, if something's exclusively bad or exclusively good, then when something bad happens, that's like the worst thing that ever happened in the world, and there's like nothing good that came of it. But like you said, if you start sort of changing the relationship to pain or something that's bad, you're going to see, well, actually, this brought me like a ton of growth, and like it showed me what I was made of. And then when this happens next time, I'm going to be way more prepared and well equipped. So it's, for me, it's eliminating that like good and bad mindset as well. I used to be really attached to like only going towards good. And then if something was bad, it was like, that's to be avoided at all costs. So, you grow so much. There's a UFC coach who says, when you get a victory, you're happy, pat yourself on the back. But actually in a loss is where you learn like so much information. So then actually like losing sometimes is actually important for furthering your career. So you want to look at like setbacks and bad things that happen in your life as sometimes maybe what you needed the most at that time. Depends on what it is. Obviously, there's levels to all the different things that can happen to a person. But generally, what I'm saying is like, we can't look at everything as just good or bad because you're going to miss out on a lot of the growth in those bad sort of times. So
I love that. I think that's so powerful. So
right.
That is it for today. If you want to have your questions answered, you can post them down below in the YouTube comments. And thank you so much for tuning in. If you want to learn more about Mike, we'll put his links to his social media down below. If you want to check out any of what we have going on at the Personal Development School, we actually have a full 14-day free trial happening right now in all of the Personal Development Schools. So you can check out every single course. You can join me in live webinars 3 days a week or other coaches in live webinars throughout the rest of the week. We have peer support groups, social events, everything to support you on your journey along with the courses to really help move the needle in this attachment boot camp kind of way to become securely attached. Again, fully free just for a limited time down below. And stay tuned for our next episode. Thank you so much for stopping by and really appreciate you being here. If you enjoyed this episode, please take a moment to subscribe, rate, and review us on your favorite podcast platform. Share it with friends and family who are on their journey of personal development and growth, and thank you for listening. Next week, we'll be back with more insights to guide you on your journey. And until then, keep practicing our tools and strategies to change your subconscious mind and apply some of the powerful learnings from this podcast so that you experience real life transformation.